Welcome back to another Post Media Senators One-on-One. I'm Bruce Garrioch, pleased to be joined today by former NHLer and TSN analyst Frankie Corrado. And Frankie, I don't want to hold you to something you said on Overdrive, but I probably will. In the confirm or deny segment, I got very little to do, Frank, so I was watching Overdrive on TV last night. But you confirmed that you think the Ottawa Senators will make the playoffs, and they are certainly in a very good position as we speak today, sitting in third place in the Atlantic Division. And I know this gets asked all the time when the standings are this tight, but number one, can you believe how tight the standings are? And number two, you do think they can survive this?
I do. I kind of thought right from the start of the season, like this was going to be the year for the Ottawa Senators. Just a gut feeling, like, because Bruce, we can always make sense of like, oh, this is, they've got the offensive players. If they play better defensively, if they get some goaltending, but there's always this like storm of things that happens that holds them back. But this year, it does feel different around this group. They're a very good defensive team, like a top 10 defensive team in the NHL. So they're built that way outward. And I think the thing that is really going to help propel that is that there's more offense than what they have kind of produced. Like they generate a lot, but they haven't really outscored what they're generating. And we're probably heading down to a portion of the season where at some point they're going to score more. They just are. There's too many good players. Now, not having Norris and not having Pinto, and I'm sure we're going to get to that, that's going to be another hurdle for them to overcome offensively, and it's not going to make things any easier for them. But I think they're built the right way, not to mention, like, if you get good goaltending from Linus Ullmark, and it was a nice positive sign last night, seeing him back in the net, like he looked good, he looked steady, and they've overcome a lot of things this year, whether it's been hurt goalie, goaltender when Forsberg was in initially, and it was like, it wasn't going well, but they've overcome that. They've overcome not being able to score, and now they're scoring more. I think they're a more mature group, and they're better suited to handle certain things that come their way.
I think one of the things I've been surprised at, Frankie, is their lack of scoring at times, because I got to be honest, coming into the season, I saw that as the least of their worries.
I guess you look at it this way. You can only prioritize so many things, from training camp onward, right? So you're always going to be talking defense with this group because that's where they had to come the furthest. And so when you do that, chances are, schematically or just where your focus goes, something is going to, get focused on less in video and in practice and all that kind of stuff. But I will say that, like my experience playing for Travis, he was a player who started his career supposed to be a bigger offensive kind of creative type and evolved into this, checking line role player and did it really well and lasted a long time in the NHL. He is not trying to squeeze any kind of creativity or take the puck out of his star players' hands. It's up to you. Like you pretty much have free reign as long as you are responsible with a good, call it third man high in the offensive zone, and we're not, trading chances. Like, he doesn't want to get caught in the track meet game. But at the same time, he's not telling you, you can't do this, you can't do that offensively. So I'm okay with the fact that they haven't scored as much because they've built this bedrock of strong defensive play. And if they didn't have that, they would not be where they are today. And if you score a little bit more, and I know, like, that wouldn't necessarily have been something you would have thought of with the Ottawa Senators, not producing a lot offensively. But if they do, it's like, man, team's in really good shape now. And you've kind of built from the ground up, which I think is the right way to do it.
It's funny you talk about him not wanting to have people thinking people show him down, because he doesn't like that narrative or that possibility of that narrative is even out there. One of the things I thought that was interesting last night, though, when you and O-Dog were talking about if they make the playoffs, he should be in that Coach of the Year conversation, shouldn't he?
He should.
Yeah. I saw a list and he was like 9th or something. I thought, well, I think he should be a little higher than that.
He should, for sure. The personnel has changed in Ottawa to a certain degree, but it's all, like players on the periphery, right? Like, just, it's been support players that have come in and out. They haven't made like the big shocking roster move. So he's working with a lot of the players that were here before. And listen, show me a good coach and I'll show you a good goaltender. Like the two
Yeah.
go hand in hand. So that has to
Yeah.
be said. But any coach that's going to win coach of the year, if it's Spencer Carberry, Logan Thompson has been outstanding this year, and Charlie Lindgren has been good there as well. So, like, that's par for the course. If Sheldon Keefe were to win, Jacob Markstrom has been outstanding. Like, it's just every coach who is in that conversation has a great goaltender. So you can't use that argument. I just think when you look at, basically keeping the same nucleus and adding around the edges, how far this group has come defensively, that's where a coach really sinks his teeth into a team. And they've bought into everything that he's been selling, and he's done a good job. And he deserves more credit when it comes to that conversation, because especially if they get in as one of the top 3 in the Atlantic. Like, I think people could have bought that, hey,
Yeah.
they'll get in a wild card in the last
Yeah.
day of the season. Sure, I could buy that.
Yeah.
But you start knocking off Tampa, I'm like, okay, now we're talking. That's a serious turnaround.
It's interesting you bring up the goaltending. I was going to save this for later, but I think we should discuss Linus Ullmark, because he did return last night after missing 19 games and 45 days with a back injury. And I thought he looked pretty good. And I thought that Levi Merilainen did an excellent job filling in for him while he was out. I think that Antoine Forsberg had his struggles, but he's righted the ship and come around. Just on Ullmark, the Four Nations is next week, and by all accounts, he intends to go, especially with Jakob Markstrom out. What's your feelings on that, Frankie?
I think if you could get truth serum into someone in the Senators organization who makes
Same
decisions,
term I used.
I think
Go ahead.
I think they would be saying, like, can you not go? And it's not just because an injury popped up recently. It's because he's been injured on and off from the start of the season. So he's been playing catch up all year long. And as soon as the workload and the intensity really picked up to a certain level, it's like something went again that kept him out. And so I get that the tournament is not a long tournament. It's not an overly intense schedule per se, but it's extra games, it's extra mileage. The thing that makes it difficult is that if you want to compare it to the Pietrangelo situation, well, Pietrangelo is older, has been around longer, has won everything there is to win playing for Team Canada and internationally. Linus Ullmark hasn't. And it's different with the Swedes. Like, I played in Sweden. They're very patriotic when it comes to this national team. Like, it's a big source of pride for them. And so, to take that away, I think something would really have to be wrong or bad, where it's like you have no choice. I think if there's ever going to be a glimmer of a chance that you could get through it and be okay on the other side, I would imagine that's probably what you're holding on to. But, like, at the end of the day, the Senators' interests and what they're trying to do is still most important. They're the team that employ him, pay him, have a lot riding on him being in the net. Me personally, I would be trying to say, man, can you put us first for this one? And I don't know if it sounds selfish, if it's a hard thing to do, but it's a reasonable ask given what his body of work has looked like this season when it comes to injuries and trying to just get back and stay back.
Well, and it's an interesting point. And I look at it from the standpoint of, I covered this team in 2006 and I always tell the story about I was standing in, sitting in the media room writing about a Team Canada game, and I looked up at the TV in the rink outside, and Dominik Hasek was leaving the net for the Czech Republic. And I was with my colleague Wayne Scanlon, and who now works for Sportsnet. We ran out to the mix zone to see him walking by, and that's basically the last we saw of him that season. And a lot of people in Ottawa feel, Frankie, that him playing for his country at those Olympics cost Ottawa an opportunity to Stanley Cup, because he went on to win a Stanley Cup with the Detroit Red Wings. I think the way the organization is trying to look at it is they don't want to try to stop Ullmark from going. I think the only way they're trying to look at it positively is that he's missed 45 days, and instead of maybe lying on a beach somewhere next week, he's at least going to be playing some hockey.
Yeah.
I don't. It's a double-edged sword, though.
Yeah, it's a good point, though, because sometimes when your body in the middle of the season just goes idle, well, that's not good either, because you go idle and then you come back and it's like, do you go from 0 to 100, or do you ramp it up properly? Do you recondition? So I can understand that. Listen, when it's all said and done, if he goes there and he takes care of himself and he plays, good hockey, and he is not any worse after the fact, and in fact, maybe if he comes back and he's in better game shape,
Everyone in Ottawa's like this, yeah.
that you'll have that conversation and you'll listen to it, and you got to hope at that point like the player really believes it and is telling the truth. You know what I mean? Like about their body, because guys just want to play. Like guys, no one wants to admit that they're too hurt to play. I don't care how good you are. I don't care how much money you've made. Like it's just such a source of pride for hockey players. So I can understand that. I think with with the way we understand like the sports science and everything, you would think like rest equals recovery equals longevity. It's one of those things you have to have the conversation. Just like my initial thought is you can actually still stay in Ottawa and skate, and you can get ice and do all that stuff and not put the miles of the games and the travel on as well. You don't have to be sitting on a beach and just being idle.
Or, go up to Mont Tremblant with your family and get some ice there. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
there's lots of opportunities
You
for
could
ice.
hire me.
I,
You could hire. I'll shoot on you for an hour. No problem. It'd
exactly.
be expensive, but I'll do it.
I, I think the one thing, Frankie, is, and you mentioned it earlier, that they don't believe Josh Norris will be out long, but I'm not sure I put a lot of stock in recovery times we get, given the length of time that some players here have missed. There isn't an update on Shane Pinto. It looked like the way he was hit, that it was either a shoulder, elbow, or some kind of arm injury. If they're out for any length of time, Frank, when Ottawa gets back from the break on the 22nd, I think they'll have 5 or 6 games before the NHL trade deadline on March 7. Should this play any role in what General Manager Steve Staios does at the deadline?
It's a good question, because you always kind of want to have a contingency plan, especially when it's a guy like Norris, where he's been so good this year. And it's like there's just a little extra jam to his game, which I like a little extra feistiness. But you always live in this world that like there could be another injury around the corner. So hopefully it's not significant for Josh and it's just a minor thing and he's back. But the team is so much different when they have Stützle, Norris, and Pinto in the lineup. Their record when they're all in the lineup together indicates it. And so, like, any team is going to have a hard time getting through a stretch where their second and third line center, both players are out, especially players of such quality that those guys are. You can move Greg to the middle of the ice. That, half solves one problem for you. Yes, it takes away from a position of strength, maybe at the wing, or, what he does down the wing. But, it's an internal solution that you do have. Norris is the big one. I still think you stick to the game plan you had. I don't know if you necessarily have to deviate from it just because you're worried about someone might be getting injured, or, like, get the diagnosis, get the rehab plan, know your timelines, and then from there, just stick to what you were going to do, because chances are these guys, well, hopefully, should be back when you're playing your meaningful games down the stretch and into the playoff run. And, you didn't have to waste an asset, bringing in something that becomes a redundancy because these guys are back and healthy.
Well, and it's interesting too, Frankie, because it's not like they've got a boatload of cap space to play with either. I mean, they've only got as with it, to call someone up. They're basically going to have to place Nick Cousins on LTIR after he had knee surgery last week, and that's still only going to give them about $1 million in cap space. That they are right tight against it, so they're going to have to do some moving around of their own if they want to bring in a top 6 forward or another defenseman at the deadline. Then they're going to have to get someone off the books. They can't do this without changing their roster.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, if you look at who the young guys, that other teams would be interested in, like, I don't know if the juice is necessarily worth the squeeze for that. It's not for them. So, there will be options. They're all going to be depth options, and that's fine. And, there's nothing wrong with having one extra NHL capable body around. Like, it's not the worst thing in the world. Prevents you from having to bring up someone from Belleville who might not be ready, or whatever the case may be. But I can't imagine it's a huge splash given the circumstances that they're in. And I also don't think they're in a position where they're looking to change course in the middle of a season. Like I don't think things have changed for them that much. Everything, things have gone well for them. They're in a good spot, but are they first in the Atlantic by 10 points and, poised to win a Stanley Cup? No, but they're a good team in a good spot. So, but I don't think that completely changes the course that you were on.
Last question. We saw Ryan Hartman get a 10-game suspension for his, I guess the best way to put it is attack.
The pile driver?
On Tim Stutz.
Yeah.
On Tim Stutz on Saturday. I mean, I knew he'd get a heavy suspension. I've got to be honest, I was surprised at 10.
I was surprised 10, but I'm happy it's 10. And you know what? If it was 12 or 14 or whatever, I think a lot of people would have been satisfied with that as well. How many more warnings do you need? You've been fined, 7 times? You've been suspended 4 times now. You can't say that, it's a face-off. You tried to take Cole Perfetti's face off on a face-off with your stick last year. So you've been warned on face-offs.
He got away with it. He got a break on that one.
He got a fine for that. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is the definition of you've been on the books and you've been warned multiple times, and it's not even close to resembling anything that looks like a hockey play. You're not trying to catch your balance. You're not falling, and none of that. You premeditated this on Tim Stützle because he slashed you and you didn't like it, and you got suspended for it, and you're forfeiting $500,000. And I've said this, I said it on Overdrive yesterday, and I'll say it to you again. He's appealing this. Gary Bettman, when they called to appeal this, should say, I'm going to tack on an extra 2 at the end of this for wasting my time with this appeal. Yeah. Because there's no way you can possibly defend that and try and minimize what he did. And it could have gone way worse. Tim Stützle was bloodied up and that gash was open. That's best case scenario. That could have gone pretty ugly.
Yeah, and I mean, I had someone say to me, if his organization should tell him not to appeal it, just for the pure fact that it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Well, Frankie, I really appreciate your time today. That's the Senators panel for this week. I'm Bruce Garrioch. Pleased to be joined today by former NHL player and TSN analyst, and we like listening to him in the morning locally on TSN 1200 as well. I'm Bruce Garrioch, and Frank Corrado, thanks for joining us.